I would never have written this book if it were not in Singapore. And the reason being, I kept it locked in my heart for many years. But here in Singapore, my husband and I found something that is very special. We haven't seen it anywhere else. And that is that people are very passionate and very outspoken about their religion. And at the same time, they are having this ingrained respect for other people's religion. And this combination, without an ounce of proselytism, it's just part of them, creates a very, very special atmosphere. In Europe, when you talk about religion, it's considered really private. And it would be invasive, impolite to even mention it. Sometimes even to family or long-term friendships. And maybe because we have had, centuries of religious wars, it could be that we have this atavic reflex and we just don't talk about it. But then I think about Singapore, and 40 years ago, you had a religious strife here. And people were killing each other for having different religious views. And look what you have achieved in just 40 years. I mean, this is exemplary for the world, this inter-religious harmony you have. So, in a way, I haven't been so courageous. It's been just natural for me to write this book here because of Singapore and the way it is. And the first thing I want to say about this book is that it's really inspired by Buddhism. For years, I have really translated the universal values, as Dr. Fung mentioned, in the corporate world. And I tried to bring them in lay terms in the world of the work. And what I saw was incredible, is that people reconnected to their own religious values. And they just managed to speak with people with sincerity, with authenticity, being themselves completely. And that has been really incredible to see. So why Buddhism? Just because it's the center of my life. And I really hope that with this book, I'm going to inspire other writers of other religious backgrounds to do the same, to think of communication in terms of inner values, because I think it could be so enriching for all of us, all over the world. So Buddhism, for those of you who are not familiar with it, has a long, complex history of 2,000 years and more, since Shakyamuni Buddha, also known as Gautama or Siddhartha. And when Shakyamuni attained enlightenment, he decided that he made the vow that he wanted to lead all people to happiness, to this indestructible happiness. And so that's what he set out to do. What I really want to talk about is the Buddhism that I practice and that I know. That's the only one I can write about. And I practice the Buddhism of Nichiren Daishonin, who is a monk from 13th century Japan. And he belongs to the Mahayana tradition, and more specifically the Lotus Sutra. So for those of you who don't know, after Shakyamuni's death, Buddhism spread in two directions. Basically, the Hinayana going south, based on his early teachings, and then the Mahayana going north from India to China, and then Korea, and then Japan eventually, over 700 years and more. And then another 700 years and we get to Nichiren's time. And he's a young boy of 12. And he looks around himself and he sees so much suffering. And the ordinary people there that seem to have no inner resource through the religion, through the Buddhist teachings. So he's really motivated to go and study and understand everything that had arrived as Buddhist teachings in Japan at the time, to really make a difference and capture the essence of Shakyamuni's teachings. So that's what he sets out to do. And for more than 20 years he does so. And finally, on the 28th of April, 1253, exactly exactly 760 years ago, he proclaimed himself as a votary of the Lotus Sutra. So I'm very happy to be able to do this book launch today of all days. And he did so, yes, yes. It's a very special day, yes. And he did so really at the risk of his life, because at the time in Japan, there was a lot of corruption that had come to the main religious sects, and they were really enmeshed with the government. They were really like established and paid patronage to them. So they forgot about ordinary people. They forgot about the peasants, the women, the lay people in general, the happiness. So when Nichiren started saying that by chanting Nam-myoho Renge Kyo, the title of the Lotus Sutra, anybody could attain this indestructible state of happiness, he disturbed a lot of people. And so he was persecuted. And they tried to do all kinds of things to him, behead him, exiled him. Well, 13th century Japan, right? So he never gave up. And the only thing that he did was always dialogue, dialogue, dialogue. He wanted people to understand, he wanted to explain. Of course, when people tried to kill him, he didn't just stay there and try to talk. He escaped. He had a good sense in him. But so that's why he's the central figure of the whole first part of my book, because he's an extraordinary communicator. And then the second inspiration in my book is my mentor, Daisaku Ikeda. He's the third president of the Soka Gakkai International, SGI. I know you like abbreviations here in Singapore. So he's an extraordinary man too. He's a prolific author and a wonderful poet. He's also a very accomplished photographer, does wonderful photography of nature that is really, really touching. But again, the main message that comes across all the time throughout these 21 years I've been practicing is the importance of heart-to-heart dialogue. And what he means by that, I believe, is really heart-to-heart dialogue based on the conviction of our full potential. The person speaking, the person listening, and vice versa, and so on. And so this is also at the center of my book. Then the third inspiration is Mr. Olivier Urbain. He wrote an amazing book on Daisaku Ikeda's philosophy of peace. It's called like that. And the subtitle is Dialogue, Inner Transformation, and Global Citizenship. So for those who are interested in the subject of global peace, do read this amazing work. It is very, very interesting, and it puts a lot of things in perspective. And then my fourth inspiration, and absolutely not the least, is my encounter and my bonding with the most amazing, extraordinary 28 young people. Kaho is one of them, Isaac. They're all here tonight, actually. They're all here. And I had the great privilege, thanks to SSA, to be able to teach them and train them and learn together with them about communication skills. They're all leaders in this organization, which is the local Buddhist organization here in Singapore. And it's very simple. This book would not be the same without my experience for 2 years with them. It's as simple as that. So let's give them a great round of applause. And they are all helping out for this book launch. And all the people that you meet about is them. And others joined as well. It's amazing. And it brought a sense of full circle in my life. Because for 10 years, I had the great joy and privilege to bring out these universal values into society. And then for 2 years now, I brought back my experience from society back to the world of faith. So it gives you this sense of full circle, which is very beautiful. So now communication, yes. Exactly like you pointed out, Dr. Fung. I'm very worried. I'm very concerned about the state of things. And I hope this book is like an alarm bell, really reminding each of us that we can make a difference the way we communicate, and it's up to each of us. Even last night with Renee, we went to the restaurant and 3 couples were next to us, and the 3 of them were not talking, they were SMSing each other as somebody else. I mean, they were not saying a word for about an hour. Some very, very young, and others a bit less young. And I mean, this is what we see in restaurants, but it happens everywhere, doesn't it? At work, communication has become fragmented. We never have a continuous flow. When we speak with somebody, beep, beep, emails, everything comes in. And then we find it normal to interrupt our conversation to try and see what message comes. Hello? This is really worrisome. And we all fall into this trap. And we let it happen, as if it depended from someone else. But it's up to us to really pay attention that this technology doesn't completely invade our life and deform it somehow. And the other thing is that at work, there's no more boundaries. We bring work at home because of mobiles, because of internet and so on. So these times where we have supposed to have like moments of self-reflection or moments of dialogue, they disappear. And it happens to Buddhists too, I assure you. me the first. So I just wanted to really remind each of us that it's something that we have to be very, very careful about. Otherwise, the world is going a direction I don't know if we're going to like it. And then also this fact that when we are with someone and we are speaking, we're not present. We're not there with this person. We're thinking about something else or responding. So communication, heart to heart, has to start really with being in synchrony with yourself, knowing what you feel. So it's a whole work of self-reflection that we need to do, and that doesn't happen by itself. And then when we are with someone, be as perceptive as possible. That's why I try to create concepts and ideas that are very practical. How can we apply all this? And one of the things that I want us to be really, really aware of is the trap of the blame game. All of us fall into this trap. When we have a negative emotion about something, is the situation, is the other person, is something. So this blame game happens to us all the time if we're not aware of it. And that's something that I would like us to develop an awareness about. And what do we do? What can we do? I created the concept of intelligence of the heart. What do I mean by that? Maybe the simplest way is to contrast it with emotional intelligence. Most of you have heard about emotional intelligence. It's been around for 10 and more years, right? And it's the capacity we have to understand our own emotions and to do something positive about it, to understand as much as possible the emotions of others and bring that in our work environment so that when we are communicating with people, then we're really reaching them and we're really understanding where the dialogue needs to go. Intelligence of the heart is basing our behavior, basing our attitudes on our values. We all have values, but do we ever think about them? And I thought a lot about them when I was writing this book, even more than before. And I came up with the conviction that we are having at least 2 types of values. The core values that we're born with. We come to this world and they're part of us. And they're very connected to our sense of purpose in life. They guide us all the time. And when we go against them, we feel something weird in our stomach. We feel suffering. So those values I call our core values. And later on I have a mini workshop for those who want to be able to name them, to become aware about them. It's interesting and it's very powerful. Now, I've been doing this for 2 years with myself, and once I named them and translated them into actions and behaviors, then it's very easy. At the end of the day, I say, wow, I lived according to this value, and it makes you feel good. And it's much less scary than the world mission, which is so big and vague. So that is something that I really, really encourage you, not just to read about in my book, but do it. Because otherwise it's just words. And the other one is the acquired values, the ones we learn from our parents, from our teachers, from our mentors. And in this particular category, I created the concept of resource values. Because when communication becomes difficult, it's good if each of us have this bundle of like 3 values in our heart that we know are there for our resource. And we have defined them, we have chosen them by doing the exercise in my book. And then it's very fast to access them in the moment. And it's very helpful for me, and I hope it can help you too, to really change the dynamic, get out of the blame game, and really make a difference there and now when you are aware that something is going tense or difficult when you communicate. So these core values and resource values are there in my book. There's a lot more of tools and exercises because I really, really wish that this book is not just one with nice ideas, but something that you can really apply in your life. And again, I want to thank another person that is not here tonight. And this book would not exist without him the way it is. He lives in England, and his name is Gordon Baxter. And I met him through Sarah. And I met him on the internet because I never met him in person. And he has been my editor. And he has dedicated like a whole year of his life back and forth in messages to really help me with the result of this book. So, hoping that he can hear me all the way to England, I'm going to say thank you, Gordon, for the very special and invaluable help that you gave me. This book would not be what it is if you had not selflessly, with intelligence of the heart, helped me all the way. Thank you from the deepest part of my heart. And then there's another person I want to thank, is my husband. And now I'm going to tell you why. Because he really is there supporting me all the time. When I'm scared, when I don't know about what I'm writing. He's my first reader. And the first time he read this first chapter of the book, I had my tongue going, what is it going to be like? And it was just so nice because he's also very honest. So he tells me when something is not good. And I know I can rely on him completely. So thank you, René. Thank you, thank you. So I'm going to finish my speech here. And I want to thank you again, personally, each one of you, for making the effort of coming. It means a lot to me, really a lot. Some of you I don't know yet. I look forward to meeting you. A lot of you I have a very strong relationship with, and we haven't seen each other recently, and it just brings me so much joy that you are here. Thank you very much.